Did we officially start since this little timer's counting down? Well, cool. Thank you all for hanging in there. How many of you have been here since like Monday, or even Sunday for that matter? Damn, you guys are tough. Someone said, so Evan, are you going to send us on after your presentation? I said, no, I'm going to run you off after my presentation. Thanks for hanging in there to the very last one. I realize I'm standing between you and liquor, and I'm sorry, because I actually asked if I could occur after the liquor, because I find that my audiences tend to be much more responsive when they're hammered. Tragically, there are cookies out there now, not beer and wine, so I apologize. If given my druthers, I would much rather have people liquored up before my presentation. Anyway, so the focus of my talk is really about dealing with all this data. I've been fascinated over the last couple of years on the presumption that if I put all the data in one place, magically all my problems go away. Not a problem. If you build a data lake, your problems are solved. It's like, if putting all the data in one place was really the problem, then data warehousing would have solved this stuff for 20 years. And if you think a data lake is going to solve all your problems, what do you think all the data warehousing people have been doing for the last 20 years? Twiddling our thumbs? It's about making the data usable. More importantly, it's about not forcing users or developers to have to conform to the environment itself. I mean, think about it. We have high ceilings in homes because it's more comfortable. If you walk on a plane, usually the ceiling or the roof of a plane is like 6'6" or so. Now, why do you think they do that? What would it be like if everybody had to crouch down and walk down the aisle of an airplane so they wouldn't bump their head and the plane was actually, the roof of the plane was at the height of the seat? So in most circumstances in our lives, the environment has been built to conform to the usage and need. But all too often in technology, we go, no, we're much smarter than that. We have lots of really bright developers and technical people. We'll force them to conform to the environment itself, which is nuts. Oh, but Evan, all the data's on the data lake. Everyone, how many files do you have on the data lake? Oh, you have 40,000 files on the data lake. How many of you have enterprise warehouses that are a few years old and they have petabytes or terabytes? You don't have 100 tables. You don't have 1,000 tables. You might have 60,000 tables, 80,000 tables, 100,000 tables. And what have you put in place so people could actually find the data? Well, why is that an issue? I mean, my favorite example is, about the Bermuda Triangle, right? I think the Bermuda Triangle of data in most companies, it's called SharePoint. And I don't, no knock against Microsoft. People are so enthusiastic, hey, this is really cool, we can put it in SharePoint. And then you try and find it. And it's like, we don't know where it went. I mean, I'm convinced those jets or those propeller planes actually, from the 40s that went into the Bermuda Triangle, they didn't go into the Bermuda Triangle. They were loaded into SharePoint, no one knew. That was like the beta test. Anyway, so I tend to walk around a lot because I fundamentally have ADHD. If you take a look at the traditional assumptions we have when it comes to dealing with data in our companies, the world has changed. And obviously you guys get that. My goodness, I'm at a Hadoop conference. But tragically, we focus all this energy on applications and coding and architectures. We don't really think much about the data. We don't think much about how it's stored or how it's treated. And everybody gives it lip service that data is an asset. Really, data is an asset. I would challenge that. I think that's lip service in a lot of instances because of the way that we behave and the way that we handle things. When someone says data is an asset, my first question is, okay, do you have customer data? And they go, of course. And you've cleansed and standardized all your customer addresses, right? And I get silence. You can hear crickets. It's like, oh, so it's an asset and it's really important, but you're knowingly loading bad data that you're running your company off of. Evan, that's not really a big deal. Oh, let me take a pinch of sugar and put it in your gas tank. It's just a pinch. Any of you know what happens when you put sugar in a gas tank? You pick up your car, you find the largest garbage can you can, and you throw it away. Completely destroys the ignition system. Oh, pardon me, the pistons and everything else. I'm not here to be pedantic or rude, but we don't treat data as an asset. We don't necessarily consider it as such. What we think about is if we store it and we prevent it from disappearing, then that's all we need. If that's how I treated children, you'd be breaking the law, okay? You can't just hang them up in the closet and come back in 12 years. In any event, back to the topic at hand. So the traditional assumption is we have data, it originates in internal systems in the four walls of my company. My data source is data warehouse, and what I mean by that is not the source systems, but if someone wants to analyze something, oh, it's in the data warehouse. It's like if you want to check out a book, it's in the city library. Users have BI and data warehousing tools, and that's how they handle all the reporting. That's all we really need. And the company runs in the real core of the company, and success is transactional systems. And anybody that's old and gray with crooked teeth like me, that inevitably is mentioned in a lot of ways. If you take a look at reality, while most of the data still is created by company systems, a third of the systems are in the cloud now. So that means I get data the way the cloud provider gives it to me. And I don't mean storage, I mean the applications themselves. Whether it be accounting, whether it be customer service, whether it be Salesforce automation, all those types of functions we have in the cloud on packaged applications. So I don't have the ability to say, just go fix the data at the source, because I can't control the source. The presumption that just go get the data in the warehouse is also completely flawed. The challenge we have is not data volumes. I don't worry about having larger and larger tables and more rows. That's easy. I can throw hardware at that problem, or I can engineer that problem. The challenge that I worry about is data breadth, because we're in a place right now where getting other data content is easy. Whether it's open source data, open source content, whether it's from syndicated data providers. So my worry is not 1 or 2 new sources in the next 3 or 4 months. My worry is I have a few hundred users, each with unique data requirements, and they're telling me, go get this source from me. By the way, here's what it costs. I've already bought it. It's on a credit card, and I've stored the data there. I'm worried about dozens of new sources every week, and how do we manage that? And the presumption is, well, Evan, we've got controls in place, and we've got a governance process, and that's not possible. Oh, come on, grow up. Users and business people have to get their job done. They don't go get new data to make your lives miserable. They get new data to get their job done. So no is not an option. I mean, what would it be like if Amazon said, you know, we're going to set the limit, only 300,000 items on our website? You'd all laugh. We don't even know how much Amazon store has from a product catalog perspective. Their attitude is, how do we add more? I mean, are you aware that like Amazon was 5 years ago sold $1 billion in lumber? Think about it, buying 2x4s online. You can do that with Amazon. The reason I mention that is we have this presumption that we know all the characteristics of the type of data that we want, and that it's always in a file, and there's a few of them, and it comes from business operations. How would you deal with 1,000 new sources next month? Amazon can do it. They can handle 100,000 new data supplier or product suppliers. Can you support lots of new data suppliers for your environment and support everything else? The other presumption that, oh, everything is just BI or everything's just a reporting tool. I love it when someone says, we've standardized, and you fill in the blank. We've standardized on Tableau, or we've standardized on Qlik, or we've standardized on MicroStrategy, or many of the open source tools. And how many believe that's really the case? There's always pockets of all these other tools also. So there's an awareness that there's no such things as transactional systems and analytical systems, and they're got nothing in common because a lot of our transactional systems have analytics built in. When you apply for a credit card, there's analytics that's already identified and run to make sure or figure out, do we continue servicing the loan or the loan app that you've done? When you're actually shown things on a web page from a lot of retail places, because of your ID and who you are, they determine what you see. So analytics has become a production business activity. So the whole idea of everything's on a warehouse, and that's analytics and everything else is not, is ridiculous. And then finally, our companies rely on all these types of processing. It's not one being more important than the other. It's not one being the redheaded stepchild. Everything's necessary. So the world has shifted and changed. And by the way, these slides, all of them will be online. My understanding is, God help you, they're actually videotaping me, so anybody that needs to get some sleep, watch the video. 10, 15 seconds, it'll put you down. But I think the presentations will be available in PDF format too. So if you take a look at some of the data challenges that we have, these are just simple quotes or remarks that I've heard from different clients that I've worked with. Why is all the data put into the warehouse? Only 3 people need to use the data. This whole idea of, well, let me put everything in one place and everybody will get it there, that presumes A, you have the time, B, that data will be needed long term, and C, everybody wants it. But what if you've got groups of 2 or 3 people that just need data for a few hours or a few days? Think about library systems. 25 years ago, most colleges would brag about the size of their central library. And they had 1 million volumes or 2 million volumes or whatever the stupid number was. And they realized, but you know, we can't fit everybody through the door in a day to get the books they want. And now the volume or the quantity of books is growing so significantly, we need to have satellite libraries. And then we realized, well, wait a second, but it's kind of ridiculous for you to have to go to the book. Why don't we set up a system where we'll ship the book to you? In most university and large city library systems, if the book's not in the location of where you're at, they'll mail it to you. Or you'll go to a closer library and it will get shipped there. Why don't we manage data the same way? Why do I need to know where the data is? We've got data federation, we've got all kinds of servers, we've got the cloud, but lo and behold, what happens? When you go to requirements with business people, you first ask, so which version of the data, or where would you like to get it from? Think about that. When you buy a bottle of ketchup, do you know where it was manufactured? Of course not. But when you want to use data, what's the first thing we ask? Well, where would you like to get it from? It's crazy. Why is it in the bottom right corner, why is it that we force business users, developers, and others to work around the architecture? Why doesn't the data architecture work around the users? Why don't we set up the system and the environment to match the needs of the people using it? We have 6-foot 6-inch ceilings in airplanes, not because, pardon me, most people are shorter than that. Certainly basketball players get screwed. There's just no way around it, okay, because there are the physics and costs of building airplanes. But by and large, the vast majority is fine by that. Why isn't our data set up the same way? So the thing that I'd have you consider, if you're approaching augmenting, expanding, trying to make your data environment quicker, faster, better, first take a look at the attributes or the dynamics of the audience themselves. What are the things that we should take a look at? And I'd argue, pardon me, there's 5 of them. The audience, who's actually accessing the data, the structure of the type of content, the domain, integrity of how good does it need to be, and then finally access, the mechanism or means by which they want to gather it. You typically hear about, well, I've got a business user that wants a report. And maybe I also have these ad hoc users. I think our environments are dramatically more sophisticated than that. We've got to build systems for developers to be able to get at it. There's a lot of visibility to the data scientists or the people that want to do data exploration. We've got business users that have their standard and canned reports that just want a few more columns. So we've got a much wider range of individuals that want to use information. Why aren't we building the systems to differentiate those types of needs? And the answer is, well, we should be doing that. The world was different 25 years ago when, well, if we wanted data, we had nothing. So when we started bringing in the first enterprise data sets, well, we put it in one place that everybody could get access to. Well, that was 25 years ago. We've done that now. I want to be able to support specialized needs, and more importantly, the awareness that the specialized needs are growing. Why isn't data as simple to get as an office supply? I should be able to go to a cabinet, get a box of pens, get the pen that I need, move on. If I want customer data, why do I need to know logon IDs, system locations, whether it's on a mainframe, a legacy system, a Hadoop system, a JDBC system, or whatever? How about you conform to the way I want? Put it in the supply cabinet. Make it simple. And all these other groups of folks. Now, there's nothing magic about my 7, by the way. The thing that you'll find is, if you take a look in your environment, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, whatever. But be cognizant of the types of people you're trying to support, because they also have different needs. For example, the access method. It was really interesting 8 years ago. The presumption was that I could load everything into HDFS, and MapReduce would be nirvana. And then people started realizing, MapReduce isn't the only way that we should probably process and deal with some of this stuff. And you've seen all the technologies evolve since then. Not trying to knock MapReduce. With more time comes more knowledge. With more knowledge comes sophistication, comes flexibility and adaptability. The thing that I wanted to show here was, if I've got data scientists, just give them the data and get out of the way. They want programming interfaces, they want SQL, they want whatever they can. You've also got a group of individuals that are just business analysts that you have to make it available to them with the SQL tools they already have. It's not fair to say, oh, by the way, change the way you do your job. I mean, what would happen to our mail service if suddenly we said, well, you know something? We've got this zero emission problem. So we're going to have to trade in all those trucks that you have that run on gasoline or natural gas, and we're going to make them battery powered. Oh, by the way, did I mention those things can only run about 4 hours a day? So we're going to have to hire 2.5 times more mail people in this country to support delivering the mail, or we can only deliver the mail 3 days a week. How would that go over? Probably wouldn't, would it? So here we are being aggressive in the idea of let's use open source or let's use Hadoop or whatever it is, and the remark is, well, we'll just have our users change the tools that we're going to support. My argument is, yeah, maybe from a dollars and cents perspective, because you can't buy every tool known to man, but we're forgetting the fact of how much time do people spend, and what's their time worth, and how long will a query take. Once again, the takeaway here isn't so much whether you like one interface or not. It's the awareness that if I'm providing data, we can't take the arrogant approach of 20 years ago and say, well, it's either a flat file or SQL. We have to support more in different flavors. We have to do that because data is an office supply. People wouldn't be asking for it if they didn't have to do their job. And that's the other thing that we sometimes lose sight of. We tend to believe that when someone has this brand new idea or something they want, it's like they're challenging us. Like it's a nice to have. People don't like asking other people for favors. They're not. It's like they got to do their job. So the thing that I want you to realize is from an access perspective, it's the methods, interfaces, and tools used to be able to get at the data. The structure is pretty straightforward. And the one thing that I'm jealous about in the big data craze is the awareness that not everything is a row and a column. We've had these different types of data content for years, whether we call them blobs or other things, is really not material. But the awareness that we have to support access to this type of information, both from an archival perspective and as a query perspective and as a processing perspective, is what I think we all have to keep top of mind. Not everybody is doing sentiment analysis on Facebook streams. My goodness, I want to club people to death, because that's the example. Or they say, well, we need to make sure that we support mergers and acquisitions. How about my day-to-day job? How about the data that I can't get access to because it's buried inside this long, big file that I need to be able to parse through? That's a very common need. So once again, the premise quite simply is my architecture or my data environment needs to support data any way, shape, or form it shows up. Okay? Next to last one, domain is, okay, do I want it from an enterprise perspective? Or maybe I just need it from a business unit perspective. Maybe I'm looking at finance data and the customer is the legal entity that I interact with as opposed to the person I sell to, as opposed to the person that I'm seeing use my product. So understanding what the context is. 25 years ago, everything was enterprise, single view. It's like, that's crap. No one cares about that anymore because we've got that. I need higher degree of granularity. I want to see things the way a particular business unit, or I want to have custom groupings or specialized hierarchies, or I want to see things a particular way that the rest of the company doesn't have to see. Why? Because I have my job. I'm dealing with risk for this particular product, or I'm focused on selling to this particular demographic or this geography. So I have to see data the way I want to see it, which means we have to be able to present and deliver it to them in that way, or get out of the way. We're not allowed to say no, nor should we have to have in copies of everything either. So once again, let's be cognizant of what are the different domains the data needs to be delivered in. Integrity is, do I clean it up or not? What's really funny is I think a lot of folks, from a user perspective, presume that if the data's been loaded, well, of course it's been cleaned. Otherwise, they wouldn't have loaded it. Now, the dirty little secret is we don't clean anything. Now, I'm not here to judge that one way or the other, okay? There's lots of reasons. Just give it to me fast, because if I got nothing, I'll take dirty data. However, I'm doing balance and controls in the financial industry. Don't give me dirty data. I need to break things down by demographic or geography or code or whatever. So I do need it cleaned and highly standardized. Once again, not here to judge what does make sense, but to encourage you ask the question. Because really, it's not about a chocolate and vanilla society. We have 33 flavors or more. What is the shade of how someone wants to see data? Is it fast and dirty? Is it fast and clean? Does it have to be annotated? Does it have to be focused on enterprise level? Does it have to be made available to data exploration people, canned report users, ad hoc report users? Nothing I'm saying is a surprise to any of you. You're dealing with this now, but you deal with it from a requirements perspective. You don't deal with it from a data architecture perspective. Think about the way a supermarket is set up. It's not set up for the convenience of the shoppers. It's set up for the convenience of the store to stock, to sell, to make money. Convenience store, it's set up for the shoppers because they want you in there and they want you out of there. Okay? Let's set the data up to simplify people's access time and usability. So the reason for the 5 characteristics is not for me to sound academic. It's if I have the choice now knowing I've got to support this level of complexity, how would I set it up? Would I have 6-foot ceilings? Would I have 4-foot ceilings? Would I have rows 4 across, 3 across? Would people be standing up? Well, in fact, if I know I've got that level of challenge, let me also acknowledge there's other initiatives that most companies have. They want to be able to deal with self-service data. I don't want someone to have to call a programmer to do something. I want them to be able to get the data themselves if possible. I want to be able to support lots of new data sources. I want to be able to share the data. I don't want everybody to have their own copy. It takes time, wastes money, don't want to do that. I don't want a data lake and then have every group that uses the lake have their own copy. Kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Having 10 copies, 20 copies, 30 copies. I also want to do something else that I can't even do now, which is the whole premise of trial and error. Load a source, see if you like it, see if we can use it, and throw it away. If it doesn't work, keep it if it does. I mean, how often have we heard the circumstance where someone says, well, you know, I'd really like to use this data set. And you go to the systems people, and the systems people, well, if you tell me what it's worth, I'll go deal with the budget, we'll go find the storage, we'll load it, we'll be happy. No, I don't think you get it. If I can't load it and analyze it, I can't tell you if it's worth anything. And so you have this tug of war, and it goes nowhere. We're at a point now where we don't know because there's new data content available to help us do more creative, innovative things. So let's have an environment that supports that type of idea. Well, let's see if I can press the button. There we go. So, pardon me for coughing. So here's a simple diagram. I'm going to walk through each one of these. But the thing that I'd have you keep in mind, if I'm really trying to address an enterprise data need, it's not enterprise level needs. It's all the needs within an enterprise. I want to create an environment that fits everyone's needs, the specific ones. I don't want to create the lowest common denominator. I want to create high specialization. If you have a unique need, I can give you what you need. If you have a unique need, I can give you what you need. And I don't force both of you to settle for less. I deal with the whole premise of data onboarding and distribution. The thing that inevitably becomes a challenge is when you buy third-party content, how do I make sure everybody has it or knows that it's even there? More importantly, what about the dirty little secret that no one wants to talk about, which is we've got internally created content and no decent production mechanism of sharing it. Things like someone says, you know, I've got this customer spreadsheet I created with the customer value score. How do I distribute that to everybody? Someone scrambles, writes code, loads it someplace. Now, in reality, it's always handled as a one-off need, and most organizations have dozens or hundreds of those one-off needs. Why is managing and dealing with an internal data set any different than buying something from Axiom? And the fact is, it shouldn't be. How many people does Amazon have to talk to? Pardon me, how many people does a supplier need to talk to Amazon to sell something? You think it's dozens? Do you think it's anybody? So why do I need to talk to anybody in my company if I want to distribute a spreadsheet to other people in the company? Would the technology organization prefer that I just do it via email, or that I actually put it into a system that can track and manage it so it's managed centrally? I mean, we know what the answer is. And we also know everybody works around that because no one wants to deal with it. Because there's this presumption that sharing and distributing data is too complicated or it's too costly. It's not, okay? So we can choose to ignore the problem, or we can try and fix it. Let's also acknowledge, let's support a diverse set of data usage needs and address the complexities of data movement themselves. All too often we talk about storing the data and we completely ignore, how do I move it? How do I not move it n times? I mean, this dirty little thing called network bandwidth is a problem in most companies, and it's a staggering cost. And does anybody think about, well, what will it cost for me to copy this data set and move it someplace? No, never. NBC Universal has a team that does nothing other than manage the movement of data sets into the company and out because there's liability and risk involved. It's actually worth their time and money to have individuals focus on that because they have thousands of data sets move in and move out. It's really kind of interesting when you think about it. Every other industry that sells products, deals with suppliers, actually has a separate discipline of movement owned. If I work for Lowe's, there's a logistics team. They don't buy the product. They don't put the product on the shelves. They don't deal with selling the product. They deal with moving product from supplier into stores. The whole data logistics or data supply chain. Why don't I have that? And then finally, how do I ensure that I don't force everybody to become a systems programmer? Do you want users to know JavaScript? Why should a user need to even know what language or system name exists? And for those of you that had the pleasure of dealing with SAP, we want everybody to know what the 32-character or 28-character name of the SAP table in German? Of course not. But in fact, most of our systems today are set up where someone's got to know a table name. Why? Do you know if you go to a Walmart or a Macy's what the rail or the area of the store is called for the people that load and stock the shelves? Of course not. You go to menswear if you're looking for a shirt, you go for where the shirts are and you pick out what you want. You don't know what the area is called, but we expect that with data. Anyway, so let's go ahead and walk through this. Now, the reason I walked you through the 5 different dimensions is we don't create an architecture and then tell you who uses it. We let the architecture reflect what people need to accomplish. So we've already talked about, listen, the reason we have source onboarding is we've got all this data coming into the company and people want to get access to it. So take a look at the dimensionality underneath. Who's the audience? Well, it's for source onboarding developers only, the people that receive and deal with inbound data. Why? Because does it make sense for me to have 5 different teams that want Salesforce data to learn all the Salesforce APIs? Or wouldn't I be better off having one team deal with that? So people don't need to know about the system of origin in the manufacturing process. But the way we typically deal with it is if someone wants data from a third-party system, they got to go build the skills themselves to go off and get that data. Think about walking into a grocery store and wanting ketchup. But the ketchup's not there in bottles. No. Because that's too complicated for Heinz. Guy walks through the store with a hose. Because there's a big tanker truck in the back parking lot, and with the hose, he sprays ketchup on the shelf. And you being someone who wants to buy ketchup, you come in with a raincoat, because he's spraying it everywhere, you don't want to get completely soiled, and you put it in like a Ziploc bag, or you put it in a bottle, because, well, you need to use ketchup. Think about that. Do we deliver data at the convenience of the manufacturing process, or should we deliver data the way that it's used? Heinz delivers ketchup in bottles because that's the easiest way to sell, move, store, and use it, okay? They don't walk through stores with hoses and spray it onto the shelf, okay? But how do we deliver data? We throw it in some crazy bulk file someplace and expect the hundreds or thousands of people that want access to it to know how it's coded. So the whole premise of data onboarding or source onboarding is let me create a level of abstraction that deals with receiving the data to ensure that in fact it showed up the way that I expected, all the rows were there, the columns were in the format that we expected and stuff like that. So the access, it's the delivery methods of the source system itself, structures based upon the source, the domain, not really applicable. But the whole point is let me just focus on delivering and capturing data inside the company. The next region is the source data repository. This is effectively the data lake. Let me put data in a format that's raw, And who's the audience? It's for the data integration, the developers, whether it be data warehouse developers, application developers, and data scientists. Here's the source content. You don't need to know where the source system is. You don't need to know the crazy native column names. We'll regulate that or standardize it for you. And if the source system changes, you don't have to worry about it. Why? Because the source onboarding crew, they dealt with that. So data always looks the way it's supposed to. When you get a different manufacturer of ballpoint pens in your company, do they build a new file cabinet or a new storage cabinet to put those red pens in? No. The new brand of red pens just go in the same place the old red pens went. You don't have to worry about source changes. The whole premise and difference between source onboarding and the source repository is the source repository is available from a file-oriented perspective of the data that people need. And once they learn the layout, we're done. They don't have to know that it came from Salesforce.com or what the web API interfaces are or the streaming interfaces for Facebook or LinkedIn or any of that, because I make it available in a format that they need. And guess what? I update it all the time. So if they need real-time interfaces, well, we give it to them. We give it to them in a file interface, okay? Anyway, the domain, not really relevant here because we're talking about raw source. So the whole idea is this is a data lake. Let's go on to the next one, which is what we call data exploration. Now, the whole premise of data exploration is I want to allow someone to take a look at it because they've got a wild, crazy idea. They're a highly technical person, and they want to access in whatever way is simple. So the audience is data scientists and analytic developers, and the whole premise is to learn from it. Because what have we heard time and again about data exploration? It's about taking learnings away. You don't build applications in this environment. You don't deploy data in this environment. This is a learning environment, which means data goes in, it never gets copied out, it only gets erased. And if you read all the stuff about data science that Davenport and others have written, that's really what they're saying. But once again, notice how the details have changed. So the structure, it's all data layouts. Why? Because I'm a data scientist, get out of my way. It's typically going to be enterprise or business level. Why? Because the data that goes into the exploration area is going to be on a context of solving a business problem. So, well, that's a different one. And is there data transformation, pardon me, is there any sort of integrity? No, they're going to want raw data. But the thing that I'd have you consider is because they're dealing with pulling data from the source onboarding, pardon me, the source repository, they don't have to deal with all these data type conversion issues. They don't have to worry about column conventions changing. They'll know what the data layout is, so they're not wasting their time becoming ETL developers. They're just pulling the data that they need. Okay? Let's move on. Fourth region is the enterprise view. Whether you want to use this as an area of your data lake or enterprise warehouse, that's what we're talking about. So it's a highly normalized, a highly cleaned up data area to support end user access and querying. So when someone says, I want raw detail, you don't come here. If you want raw detail, go to the source repository. If you want stuff with checks and balances, cleanse standardized content support, canned reporting, ad hoc reporting, whatever it is you want to do, you come here because it's an enterprise view. The other thing that you're noticing is what I'm doing is I'm walking through the types of support you already have to provide. So in moving forward with a data region approach, it's not about wiping the slate clean and starting from scratch. It's about how do I enhance the things I already have to support different groups, but not force them to settle for less. Should I use data exploration in a data warehouse? No, because we know that a data exploration person has these other types of needs. They need to support unstructured content. They want both record and or very simple low latency time access versus other things. Anyway, here we want high level of integrity. It's enterprise level content, not something specific to a business area. And the data is highly structured. Would we have unstructured content available here? Certainly, but in most instances, it's already been synthesized and annotated so people can use it in the existing reporting tools that they have. Let's move on. The last three that I'd mention is first the sandbox. Now, why is a sandbox different than data exploration? Well, let's take a look. The audience is really advanced business users. These aren't people writing APIs to look at transactional detail. These are people that are working with reporting tools they already have, and they need to add an extra column, 3 more columns, 3 more pieces of data because they've got a crazy wild idea. So for lack of a better description, it's a more trimmed ideology of data exploration, but it's built for a business user. So they want to try out a new data source from a third-party provider. You load it into the Sandbox with data from the enterprise view and give them what they need. It's a time-limited environment. The domain, it's any and all domains, so maybe it's business level, maybe it's enterprise level, but it's pretty much got high integrity data. Why? Because it's being filled up with mostly enterprise data with this other third-party content. The other third-party content obviously is not going to be cleaned because we don't know anything about it. Okay? So what's the difference? Well, data scientists wouldn't use this because it's not flexible enough. This is a DBMS environment. This is for reporting tools. This isn't for sophisticated prediction and other types of algorithms. This is for running SQL. Okay? You'll also notice the quantity of users will vary. They grow on the user side. They're far less on the more sophisticated side. Anyway, the reporting in BI, this is your typical data mart environment. What's changed is I still have the business user audience. It's SQL-based, but in reality, the domain, while it might be enterprise data, they're really focused on business-level types of analysis. I have the data conform to the particular business need that exists. Okay? So it's data mart. Finally, the last one is advanced analytics and modeling. Whether you're using R, a package tool for risk analysis, or something like SAS, really this is about doing advanced analytics that's put into production. All these orange, these two orange, this is a production system. The Sandbox, data never leaves, very much like the data exploration area. This is for learnings. These two, if I want to deploy a new reporting system, it goes into here. If I want to deploy advanced analytics, it goes into there. Okay? So once again, you can see compartmentally, the audience has changed because in advanced analytics, I've got a highly skilled technical staff, whether it's data scientists, developers, or others. Now, why would a data scientist use this environment and not data exploration? And the difference is very, very obvious. Data exploration is for learning. If this data scientist was tasked with building a production app or a customer value score that needed to be deployed, they'd have to do it here because we've got the support infrastructure for this type of environment. I've actually got users that will, or pardon me, systems people that will ensure the system's always up, that it's software on versions that are supported, and if there's a problem, someone will come fix it. Data exploration, if it breaks, it's left up to the data scientist to fix, other than if it's a raw platform. So what I've tried to illustrate is each one of these boxes isn't about the box. The box is a reflection of the 5 attributes themselves on the particular need that audience requires. Okay? So once again, it's about the architecture fitting the usage need, not the usage need conforming to the architecture. And obviously, this is a logical concept, and a logical set of constructs. So you could group boxes onto individual platforms. Okay? But you want the rigor of data movement, data copying, security to be specific to that box. The other thing I'd have you consider is, so when concepts of ETL processing or metadata, it's not platform specific. We don't have that luxury anymore. When someone says, yeah, we've got metadata tools for a data warehouse, well, what good is that if I've got data coming from a dozen different source systems and being distributed to all these different analytic platforms? I can't have platform-specific data services. I need enterprise data services, and that's the whole premise here. I need governance to be able to span all the regions that you're supporting. Whether or not you agree with the concept of the data regions, you're already living the dream. You don't have the luxury of saying governance is specific to an individual platform. Okay? Last slide, and I have a minute, 15 seconds. Given that there's nothing holding you here other than my sterling personality, poor sense of humor, and alcohol being elsewhere, I'll be glad to stay and answer any questions that you might have, but also for those of you that want to escape and run like hell, we will finish on time. In any event, in moving forward with this concept, or with any sort of architecture, start where you're at. Don't assume you have to go to the whiteboard and wipe the slate clean. You might have a circumstance where you're taking a look at, I've got a data lake, what's the boundary of what I'm going to offer? Take a look at the region concept, because what you may choose to say is, you know something, maybe step 1 with our data lake is we make it that shared source repository. So everybody's not making their own copy. And if someone says, well, you know, we'd really like to do operational reporting, fine, but let's do one box first so we understand what the support implications are, who the audience is, to understand what it is we're exactly delivering. Rather than making it a platform-driven activity, make it a user in some of the attributes themselves. The other thing that I'd have you consider is, Everything that we do today assumes that data sharing is a courtesy. Getting data from a source system is a favor. Someone getting a file someplace, that's not the way it needs to be. Data sharing is a production requirement. People delivering data the same day or same time every day is something that you guys have learned about and know about and live. But that's an anomaly in most organizations. It's a courtesy. So with that, I will end 22 seconds early. But if you have questions, please raise your hand and I will answer them. If you don't have questions, please drink heavily.
They're used to Greenplum, and another person's used to running, a different way. So, how do you balance that? Right?
Well, it's a set of logical constructs. If you have an existing data mart environment using 3 different products, they're all going to be in the reporting and BI box. Okay? If you've got an environment where people are bringing data in and doing things wildly because it's more of a sandbox environment, fine, it's a sandbox. I think where you raise your hand and say, guys, wait a second. Here's what the boundary of the support is that we can provide. When you're pulling data in from third places that don't come from platforms we support, we're not going to support that data. So it gives you some flexibility of establishing here's where the pylons are of what you will do and where you can't feasibly be successful. So that's how I'd attack it. But it's also, it's conforming it to what your users want. If your users want the ability to change platforms all the time, what you might be talking about more is almost an exploration type perspective, which is also understanding how much volatility of platforms will you allow and still support production delivery. And you can't do both.
I think they still want, ultimately it's like, look, we're SQL users. We just want to run SQL queries against all of the Hadoop, right? And that's, well, you have Hive and Presto and all these,
Well, what you're really talking about is the orange levels. We're talking about it's a reporting BI environment. What the platform is less important than here's the functional capabilities they want.
Right, but still, like if we have one large prod cluster, that's where we're doing all of our production job processing, as well as some custom jobs that get vetted, and then there's another data warehouse, and that's really for analytics to go do their thing, so it doesn't impact production processing, right? So is that, but not all the data is over here.
So what you've described is we've got this platform for this type of processing. Right. We've got another platform for similar type of processing, but only for these applications. What you just described is an architecture that forces users to place what they're doing on not their needs, but on the convenience of the platform supported. So it's actually, that's what we're trying to get away from, because it's not scalable. Yeah. You forced users to say, well, if I don't like that, I'm going to buy my own.
Or duplicating data.
The whole idea here is you don't want users to have to say, I'm going to go buy my own because you're not giving me what I want. I go back to the attributes themselves. Understand the variety of the 5 different areas. Let me jump back real quick. Usually, to address the type of challenge you're talking about, I wouldn't talk about the regions as much as I'd understand, wait a second, tell me about these different dimensions. What is the variations of the audiences and the integrity and the access? Anybody else with a question? Slides and video will be online with everything else when it's made. What I've been told is literally within the day, the video stuff should be online. They said it was probably a few days before all the decks get uploaded, but they'll all be there. Thank you for the question. Well, anybody else? I will hang out until everybody leaves. Thank you again for coming.